Thanks for coming out this afternoon. Happy Professional Development Day. You guys had a really nice morning, I trust. A lot of planning went into your PD. Great. Some clapping here in the front. They feel sorry for me. My name is Erin Gadd. I'm the Director of Communications and Community Engagement, also known as the person who emails you all the time. Very nice to meet you. And today we have a special guest because I am guessing the last couple of weeks you guys have been getting a lot of questions about bed bugs. No? No, not Hawthorne. Way to go, Hawthorne. And I'm guessing too that like you're at the grocery store or you're getting emails from parents and they're expecting you to be all of a sudden like entomologists as well as experts in education and children. So today we're going to help you out a lot. Number one, the purpose of this coming together, and we know this is a big day for you, so please thank you so much for coming out. You're going to learn from the expert. We have Scott Posna here from the County Health Department who is going to be making us all smarter, a little wiser about bed bugs, and also helping to ease some of the concerns that we might have in our own buildings so that we can be like that steady, calm voice when we have a little bit of panic on this issue, because I know it's been crazy. We've all been getting those phone calls. So sit back, relax for a nice, enjoyable presentation about bed bugs.
Thank you so much, Erin, and thank you for inviting me here today. 5 years ago, I would have never have dreamt that I would be giving a presentation on bed bugs. They really weren't around, and you didn't hear much talk of them. How things have changed, huh? We used to get a call maybe once or twice a year. As of late, we're probably getting about 25 calls a day at the health department regarding bed bug issues, some of which you guys are very familiar with. So I'll kind of go through a brief history of the bed bug life cycle. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I guess the way we'll handle this is if you have questions, just raise your hand or feel free, to interrupt. We'll make this informal. Okay, so the first question is I get from most folks is, what's up? Why do we have this bed bug problem? Again, like back in the 50s and 60s, bed bugs were almost eradicated from the United States. So, what's the issue? What has changed to make these things so prevalent now? One is international commerce and trade. With the air travel and such, everything's just a matter of a plane ride away. So, bed bugs have been brought in through commerce. Also, students and international students can bring bed bugs in on their belongings. Change in pesticide use. Everybody remembers back in the day of DDT and orthene and such. Those were what they refer to as general use pesticides, meaning when you put them down, they would kill a whole spectrum of bugs. Which is why you still often hear, how great things used to be with pest control. You put down a product and you had no pests for quite some time. With the EPA re-registration of these products, they're looking to have it very specific. So if you have a bed bug control product, it should only control bed bugs. Same thing with cockroaches and so on. So as a result, a lot of the applications that were made in housing for cockroaches were used to control bed bugs also. With the product being more specific now, it just controls cockroaches, and the bed bugs are kind of free to reproduce. Also, there's a little bit of concern about pesticide resistance. Folks often will treat homes themselves or their personal space, and that's where like the public health part of it comes in. Bed bugs in and of themselves do not transmit disease, but our concern is what folks are putting down in their homes or in apartments that, to treat these things. Oftentimes they're pesticides that aren't labeled for bed bugs, and they're pesticides that are intended to be used outdoors. So when used indoors, they don't break down and you have that residual for quite some time. Okay, another question. We have quite a few folks in the past that would come to the health department and say, I have this bed bug problem, can you take a look at this? The first thing I ask people is like, we have to determine if you really have bed bugs. Oftentimes, people will bring in things that they think are bed bugs, but they're really not. So you can see their bed bugs range in length from about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. They're oval shaped and flat, and they do not fly or jump. That's what is probably the biggest misconception. Folks will say, I had these bed bugs and they were jumping all over. They were flying when I touched them. They will not fly, but they do run pretty quickly. And that's a bed bug. Just out of curiosity, have you folks all seen bed bugs? Yeah, so, okay. Hopefully not too many times. Okay, and here's what we often see, especially to the left there. Folks will bring in materials, personal items with these small bugs. They're typically beetles. Although, you know, with the prevalence of bed bugs being a bigger and bigger issue, people are more educated and the identification of them is getting better. But in the past, a lot of beetles were misthought of as being bed bugs. So the bed bug goes through 6 stages in its life: egg, 5 nymphal stages, and an adult. Bed bug eggs. This is probably the biggest problem with bed bugs, because you can kill the bed bug itself, but what do you do about the eggs? And that's the reason we have reinfestations. The female lays up to 5 eggs per day, 500 eggs in her lifetime. The eggs have a sticky substance on them, so they actually like kind of get cemented or adhere to the substrate on which they're laid. So vacuuming and like physical removal isn't very effective. You really need to kill them. And the eggs will develop in 6 to 17 days, depending on the temperature and humidity. And what's also unique, you always hear the life cycle of various things, sea turtles or whatever, and out of 1,000 eggs, one may make it to adulthood. Bed bugs have a really successful hatch rate, about 97%. So unfortunately, their offspring are pretty viable. And there's bed bug eggs. I don't know if you can see that. It looks a little blurry to me here. But those are bed bug eggs. You can see that they're small and clear, and they're hatching off into that first nymphal stage. Okay, the nymphal stages. After the eggs hatch, they go through those 5 nymphal stages I mentioned. In reference to the temperature and humidity, you could see there, at 86 degrees, they'll hatch in 21 days. At 65 degrees, it's 121 days. So cooler temperatures will prolong this. And oftentimes that's the problem we see in multi-unit housing or apartments. If the unit's not rented, sometimes intentionally because they do have bed bugs, they'll do a couple spray applications which may control the nymphs and adults, but does nothing for the eggs. So what happens then is the thermostat's turned way back and it's not rented for a month or 2. So with the lowering of the temperature, it delays the egg hatch time, and eggs that are in there hatch then when you get a new tenant. The first nymphal stage is called the instar stage, and the instars need a blood meal within about 3 days, or they'll start to die. They won't die in 3 days, but they'll start that process mainly from dehydration. They need fluids. And that's a reason why schools aren't a good place for bed bugs, because once those eggs hatch, they should be near a host, a person, so that nymph can get that blood meal. So in schools, it's so transient. You have people during the day, and then everybody kind of clears out. So it's not a very good environment for bed bugs. Yeah. we got some applause there. Good question? Yeah, the question was, since they need a host, will they jump on an animal? If they're desperate, yes. Bed bugs prefer to be on people, but you're correct. If there's a dog around or a cat, they will feed on that. What? What about mice? I don't know that for certain, but I would suspect that they would feed on a mouse too. Anything that would provide a blood meal. Okay, there's a picture of a unfed nymph. And in those 5 nymphal stages, the nymphal form of the bedbug needs a blood meal to advance to the next stage. So if they don't have a blood meal, they won't make it to the next stage of maturity. So you can see here's a nymph that has not fed. It's almost translucent. There's one feeding. It gets better. And there's one that's fully engorged. Okay, adults. Boy, this is a squeamish group. These aren't even the good photos yet. Yeah, this kind of gives you a perspective of size. And those are mature adults. Those are pretty big. Okay, bedbugs can live up to about a year, maybe 14, 15 months without feeding. And that's about the life, the typical age of an adult, around a year 14 months. They expand up to about 3 times their body weight after feeding, although some of the literature that I've seen suggests they can even go up to 7 times their body weight. So they do take in quite a bit of blood. They're active normally at night, but they will adjust their pattern based upon their host. And that, we've heard a lot of anecdotal stories from folks that had bedbug issues. They said, well, I just stay up at night and I'll sleep in the afternoon, thinking that would prevent the bites, but the bedbugs will adjust. And they have, much like mosquitoes, when a mosquito bites you, they spit into you a anticoagulant so that the blood comes out nice and smooth. It's not too chunky and you don't have to really work too hard. That's what happens with the bedbugs also. So when you get bit by a bedbug, it will actually spit an anticoagulant into you so that the blood comes up nice and fluid-like, nice and smooth, yeah. Okay, so I mentioned as far as the blood feeding, they do feed mostly at night typically. They don't like to be out and exposed. They tend to hide in little cracks and crevices. They'll come out in the evening. A question? The question is, the bedbug look kind of like a tick, and I guess they do. A tick is going to be bigger than a bedbug. A bedbug's going to be flatter and much smaller than a tick. But they don't burrow in as a tick would. Ticks kind of stick their whole head into the host, where these just kind of stick their mouth part in. Another question? I'm sorry? Okay. The question was, folks that travel out of the country, Africa and such, oftentimes they'll put something on their clothing to prevent bugs, mosquitoes, and stuff from biting. The product that's typically used is called permethrin, and that would probably provide some benefit to you. The issue becomes, and we have this happen on a regular basis, what's worse, the bedbug bite, which does not transmit disease. You might get a secondary infection, but the bedbug bite or topically putting pesticide on your skin. And what folks generally tend to think is if a little's good, a lot must be really good. So we've had people put concentrated permethrin on themselves, and you can run into some neurological problems by doing such. So I wouldn't suggest that, but yeah, there is probably some benefit to having some product, whether it be like DEET that's used for mosquito control, that would probably inhibit some bedbug feeding. So in regards to feeding, they feed for about 3 or 10 minutes, then crawl away and enjoy the blood meal they just took off of you. And they're attracted by carbon dioxide, which everybody knows what you breathe, and heat. So when you're in a room, they'll sense that. If you have a lot of people in the room, you have more CO2, and it becomes almost like a feeding frenzy. You know, the bedbugs have all the CO2, they know there's hosts in there, and they want to emerge. Which is another problem with housing and bedbug control. If you don't have somebody living in a structure, there is no CO2, and there's nothing to really bait or attract the bedbugs. So they'll just kind of sit and hide, waiting for that host. So in vacated places, you don't have an attractant, and they're going to just wait until somebody does inhabit the place. Okay, so now that we know we have bedbugs, we're going through the life cycle and such, where do they hide? Everyone thinks that they're on a bed, and that is pretty much true, again, because they're somewhat lazy. Why walk 20 feet when you can walk 2 if somebody's going to be sleeping? So where we typically find bedbugs is wherever folks spend most of their time, on couches near the TV, in the bed, and sometimes like at a kitchen table. But if you have like a dining room that you seldom go in, that's probably not where you're going to find bed bugs. Okay, so what do you look for? Blood stains, and this would be typical of a pretty good infestation. With a bed bug or 2, you're not going to see much of this. But with an infestation, you'll have blood stains. You'll have fecal spots, which we have some photos and it'll show you what these things are. Eggshells and shedded skins. And I've never smelled this myself, but I guess in real bad infestations, you'll have like a musty, kind of sweet odor associated with them. And there they are. Yeah, and that's, the photo to the right is a magnification of the one on the left. So you can see the one on the left isn't really that bad. I mean, it looks, fairly typical, but that's what you're going to be seeing. And if you're ever at a hotel motel or something, peel back the mattress liner and take a look. Most of them are pretty good, though. And there's the fecal and blood stains on a mattress. And again, that would be an excessive infestation. Okay, again, folks think of the bed, and when we do these surveys to see the extent of a bed bug infestation, you really need to look everywhere. Electrical outlets will have them. There's even been a case down in Cincinnati where it was an assisted living facility had a bed bug problem with one patient, and they couldn't figure out where they were coming from. They sprayed, they tried to bait these things. They thought they had it under control, and it turns out the bed bugs were actually in the gentleman's prosthesis. So that's where they were spending their life. So really anything close to a person or where a person habitates that they can fit into, they will. And that's what we're looking for. Folks that have a bad bed bug problem will present this way, and you can see there, I don't know if everybody can see it in back, but the bed bug bites tend to trail. Unlike some other things, which I'll show you in upcoming slides, as opposed to like a general rash, you'll kind of see like a bite, movement, and bite. So when you get that trailing pattern, that's indicative of a bed bug. There's some more. And again, getting into the public health side of things, I've mentioned a couple times that bed bugs do not transmit disease. But the picture on the right there shows an infant in a tent-type setup. And in some places where they've had a bigger bed bug problem for a longer time than the greater Cleveland area, like down around Cincinnati, they actually had folks that were using the tomato dust. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the chemical called Sevin, the insecticide. Well, that's what's using that tomato dust, and they were dusting children's cribs to prevent the bed bugs from crawling onto the infant. And you can imagine a child sleeps, 16 hours a day or something. Laying on that neurotoxin isn't good. So here's some similar looking things. These are chigger bites. They tend to be around the lower part of the body, your ankles and calf area. And you can see that's just kind of a random bite pattern, unlike the bed bug bite. And scabies, which is a smaller kind of almost rash type bite. And the reason I put these in here is sometimes folks will jump the gun. They'll see a couple red welts on somebody and it's bed bugs, and they kind of hit the panic button. So just because a child may come to school with some sort of red bite pattern, it might not necessarily be bed bugs. Sure. Yeah, that can work. What you're dealing with there is boric acid. There's something else that I would recommend. It's diatomaceous earth, which in and of itself isn't a chemical. It's just diatoms that are very, very sharp microscopically. So as bed bugs will cross that threshold, they actually get it's like razor wire. They get sliced up. So it's a nice way to kill bed bugs without actually using a chemical. Any other questions? Go ahead. I'm sorry? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the question was, if you had scabies, what does that look like? That was the slide I showed previously here. It's more of a small rash type bite right there. Then that identified different welts. Yes? The question was, some parents that had a bed bug problem were told by exterminators that if they used rubbing alcohol or some sort of alcohol, would that work? And the answer is yes, it's very effective. There are some limitations to it. You don't want to put it on things that will discolor. If people are putting on furniture and such, it'll take off the stain. And you don't want to use it around a heat source. Well, yeah, it seems obvious, but there was a person down around the greater Cincinnati area years ago who had done that. They used rubbing alcohol, and they did a real nice job cleaning things up. And as I'll talk about in upcoming slides here regarding treatment, heat's very effective. So they used the rubbing alcohol, thought it had evaporated, cranked up space heaters, and they burned their house down. So I guess they were effective in getting rid of the bed bugs. But I would imagine their insurance company wasn't probably too happy about that. Okay, so, again, I don't want to minimize bed bug bites. I said that they don't transmit disease, but it does create wounds for other opportunistic infections, whether it be fungal or bacterial. So if you do have a situation where somebody's getting a lot of bed bug bites, they do want to treat that. Okay, in control. So we talked about the life cycle, where to find them. Now, how do you get rid of them? There's 4 options. You can use pesticides, you can heat it, and you can wash your clothing, or you could freeze it, which is very seldom talked about. As far as the pesticide treatments go, really is any treatment, pesticides or heat, The biggest problem extermination companies face is the prep for a bed bug treatment. If people have a lot of things sitting around the house, a lot of clothing that's sitting in piles, it provides safe havens against the pesticide. The pesticides need to come into contact with the bed bug in order for it to kill them. So if they can hide someplace, it really makes the pesticide treatments ineffective. In addition, with heat, the literature varies a little bit. It'll tell you 113 degrees will kill bed bugs, and I believe it does, but the duration is pretty long. It's about 2 hours. 118 will do it in about 70 minutes. So if the bed bug can hide someplace where that ambient air temperature doesn't get as hot, they'll survive very well. So the key with any of these things is to make sure that everything's picked up and the structure has minimal hiding places or harborage areas for the bed bug. Was there a question? Okay, somebody had a question there. Okay. The question was, how can you find out how your dryer runs? You could, if you wanted to, they make a thing called a maximum registering thermometer, and you could throw that in there. But most dryers will be more than sufficient to kill bed bugs. And that's what we typically recommend to folks that have a bad problem, is to dry your clothes in the morning before you head off to work or school, and that will prevent you from introducing bed bugs to wherever it is you're going. Also, we have a home very near here, actually, that has probably the worst infestation that I've been involved with in my 23 years at the health department of cockroaches. And while I was investigating that, I found out that they had bed bugs, and I also found out that my little Tyvek jumpsuit that I was wearing looked like I had been sprayed with pepper from all the fleas that were on me. So it was quite an experience. But the pest control company is going to do several things, but how they're going to control the bed bug issue is by freezing. So I'm kind of looking forward to participating in this because I've never seen it done. But they actually use liquid nitrogen, and it'll kind of off-gas, like if you put dry ice in water, you'll get that like eerie smoke. They walk around the baseboards and stuff with this liquid nitrogen, and the cold will actually freeze the adult bug. It freezes the eggs, and the eggs basically burst. So it's very effective. Okay, how in your? I'm sorry. Yeah, with the furniture, you're limited to heat or a pesticide application. And another thing to mention with pesticide applications, you're not going to get 100% kill or 100% efficacy with one application. So it's usually 2, 3, maybe even 4 applications before you really get a handle on it. Because you do have that issue with the bed bug eggs and the secondary and tertiary hatches and such. So that's where a lot of landlords and such kind of drop the ball. That they'll do one treatment in one unit of a apartment complex, and then that's it, and you get the secondary hatch from the eggs, and it's back to how it was prior to the first treatment. Okay, to limit the spread of bed bugs between the school and home, as I mentioned earlier, folks can launder their child's belongings, book bags, clothes, and such that they're going to wear that day, and then put it on or pack them in a bag, and then the child can wear that to prevent bed bugs from being introduced to the school. Examine backpacks and lunch boxes every day, and isolate the students' belongings in sealed plastic bags or containers. We have a couple schools in other districts that we're currently doing that with. If the school nurse identifies a child that has bed bugs and they actually see the bed bug on the child, they'll kind of pull them aside and take their belongings and put them in a sealed bag until they can go through it. Question back there? The question was, does the health department or anybody have any monies available for folks that may be in a situation where they can't afford a treatment and the landlord won't pay for it? And that is the question. And unfortunately, the answer is no. We're trying to come up with a way to finance some of these treatments. But currently, the only thing that I've been made aware of is some like local church groups and stuff may have a fundraiser, and it's a couple $100s for a specific situation. But oftentimes, even that kind of falls financially short of what's needed. Question in the corner? Okay, great. There's a funding source that I was unaware of. So hopefully folks will be able to tap into that. Any other questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the question is, how do you protect yourself if families won't do these things? And that's a great question. And that's the problem with the bed bug issue right now. Oftentimes these children are from split parent households, so the father may have a bed bug issue, the mother may have a bed bug issue, neither can afford treatment. So if they do what they can, but you really need to have everybody involved, do proper treatment to break that cycle. As far as yourself goes, just be vigilant. If you suspect somebody has bed bugs, look for them discreetly. If it happens to be a student, I wouldn't single anybody out, but just kind of observe their belongings. And if you do find one on yourself, I get this fairly frequently. Somebody will call the health department and they're literally freaking out. They found a bed bug. And what I have to tell them is, if you found a bed bug, that's what you did. You found a bed bug. It doesn't mean you have an infestation, but start to monitor yourself. If you have one on your person, check your belongings, your purse, clothing, and such that you wore that day. And if you don't find any more, it was probably just a stray hitchhiker bed bug. If you start to see it, one or two the next days and weeks, then look a little deeper, and you may be at the start of a problem. Mm-hmm. Good point. Yeah, the statement was, you can't rely on somebody else to do what they're supposed to in this situation, but if you have bed bugs or suspect that you may have had them, stick your own clothes in your own dryer when you get home. That's very good. Mm-hmm. Well, the question is, a lot of the elementary rooms have carpeting, and will vacuuming help, and should they be getting rid of carpeting? The answer probably is yes. It's not that carpeting is bad, but it is a place for bed bugs to hide. So you don't want to completely eliminate carpeting because it may pose as a harborage area for bed bugs. But in the same token, you wouldn't have that potential harborage site if you didn't have carpeting. So I guess my answer to that would be, if you have a bed bug problem where you're getting multiple sightings of bed bugs over a time period, you may want to look under the carpet. But with regular vacuuming and maintenance, it should not be a problem. Because again, in a school situation, you'd be getting like a bed bug or two that would come in with a student, and if you see them, kill them, and that should be the end of it. Mm-hmm. The question is, can bed bugs go outside and go across the street and such? I guess it depends on how adventurous a bed bug you have. If it's kind of a lonely stay-at-home bed bug, not so much. Anything's possible, but bed bugs really don't like to do that. They like to be on a person, and again, they're sort of lazy. Why walk 20 feet if you can walk 2 feet? But I suppose if you had a bed bug and you dumped it in your front yard, it would look for a host or a blood meal. So it's possible, but very unlikely. Yeah, if you have a house next door that's infested, they're not going to want to come to your house or migrate over. They'll stay put. More of an issue would be if you socialize with individuals in that home, they would bring them over on their belongings. Yes?
They can go a year without eating, so if they eat today, they can still eat tomorrow if they want.
Right. Yeah, the question was, I mentioned earlier that they can go up to a year without feeding. And the gentleman here asked if they are fed, will they wait that year, or can they feed again? And the answer is yes. As soon as they digest that blood meal, they'll feed again. Another good question. If there's eggs and you step on them, are you carrying the eggs around? Possibly. When I'm in a home that has a bad problem, an infestation, I wear a Tyvek suit, which I take off. But if you had a pretty thick tread on your shoe, there's a lot of what ifs. But if you did step on something that did have the eggs, it could get in the tread, and you could transport them that way. Yes? Good question. The question was, if you have a student that may have a bed bug, or I mentioned you want to stay vigilant, what do you look for, and what's the difference between an infestation or just like a random bed bug? And I guess there's no threshold from a couple bed bugs to an infestation visually on a child, but I would look for bed bugs and the number of them. If they have one or two, it may just be random. If they're bringing in a dozen with them or more, then it's probably more serious at home. And look for those bites. If it's that bad that they're bringing bed bugs to school, their home is probably infested to the point where they're getting bitten while they sleep, and they're going to have those telltale trailing bite marks on the student. Okay, and the last point here with schools, the key I think really is to work with the parents. The school, should contact the parents and kind of get a feel for how bad it is. They can call the health department. The school can call the health department. I'm willing to go out to homes and kind of assess how good or bad it is. And from the parent standpoint, their key piece is to be honest. Many times because of societal issues or things, folks don't want to admit they have a bed bug problem, or don't want to admit that they have that bad of a bed bug problem. So they'll tell you, well, it must have been one or two that Johnny brought to school, when really it's much more than that in their home. Okay, so we theoretically cleaned up our bed bugs. Okay, I got 1 minute here, so it works out perfect. I'm at the end of the slides. So some schools have done this. There are dogs that are trained to sniff out bed bugs. So if you suspect you have a problem or you're having multiple rooms, multiple schools with problems, you can have a dog go through it and kind of clear it. The caution with that is, again, it's kind of a moving thing. You may not have bed bugs today. A student can bring them tomorrow. So the dog clears a building. It might be cleared for a day, and the following day there's bed bugs again. And these Interceptor trays you can use at your home or at school or in the office. And basically it's a micro-polished plastic, so the bed bug falls into it and can't climb out. So it's a good way to kind of like check and see how bad your problem is. And again, education and prevention. We had a hotel in Lorain County that had a pretty severe bed bug issue. They had all their mattresses lined up by the dumpster. I had gotten a complaint call because residents thought it was unsightly. Well, the complaint took care of itself. Over the course of about a week, folks came and picked them up. So that just spreads the bed bugs further. For more information, you can go to our website, Lorain County Health. You can go to Ohio Department of Health or the Centers for Disease Control. And if any of you want more in-depth information, the Cuyahoga County Bedbug Task Force is putting on a presentation on November 5th. It's pretty informative, and they have people from industry as well as academia, and so there for questions. So that's it. I think my time's up.
I guess first I'd like to thank all of you for your flexibility. I know we kind of tweaked your calendars or your schedule for today at the last minute, and I appreciate you making things work out so we can hang out here and listen to what Scott had to say. But taking a step back, I called the mayor about a week and a half ago. He immediately gave me some solutions and told me to talk to the health commissioner, Dave Koval. I talked to Dave. He said, I'll call you first thing Monday. Dave called me at 8 o'clock Monday morning. He had his team out there at 10 o'clock Monday morning, and we began to plan together. So I just want to thank for Scott Ponza, Dave Koval, the whole team, the mayor, for partnering with us. It's not a school issue, but it is our issue because we're part of the community, and we need to work together to make sure we work on these things. But Scott, I thought, did a phenomenal job. You asked a lot of tough questions, I thought, but he knew the answers and kind of rattled things off pretty quick. So one more round of applause for Scott Ponza.
This has been a production of Lorain City Schools TV 20 WLCS.